Welcome to BSO Backstage, a concert preview. I'm joined here with Dan Alcott and Laura Clemens from the Bryan Symphony Orchestra. And what an amazing concert that was. Tell us a little bit about the experience for you all doing the Beethoven's Ninth. Yeah,
it was, you know, it's been fun to talk to so many people. People have been very forthcoming with their excitement about the concert. You know, before a concert happens, I'm in hyper management mode, you know, in a lot of ways, and actually even during a concert, sometimes there's just so many things that that I'm focused on, and the impact, you know, long term, we had known that the impact of finally performing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for the first time in Cookeville, and thinking about the specialness of a performance of really one of the landmarks of Western civilization in our town. Was really neat. That we knew was a neat thing, but the actual event, you know, as it grew closer to the event, and you know, all the things going through my mind, and the planning and the studying and restudying the score, you know, I kind of got caught up in that in my own little world. So it's been fun for many days at the grocery store or here at Sweet Sally's for people to reach out and say that it really was a high impact moment, you know, for us artistically in this community. And I was just so thrilled with the way the performance went. I frequently feel like if you have a super great piece, you really can't keep it down. I mean, even if you don't do a perfect performance, it's still going to have an impact. But I just felt like it went about as well as it could have gone, and it's an exciting moment for me personally also.
And right after the concert was over, social media, Facebook, Twitter was just flooded with tweets and posts about the concert and how exciting it was for everyone. So that was really cool to see. I was wondering, how big of a role does social media play in helping get the word out about the orchestra and the concert series?
We have a great audience on our Facebook wall. It's a devoted crew. It has really come in handy when we have to get news out very quickly, like when we get rained out in the park for 2 years running. It helps enormously to let people know that way. And it's amazing how many of our audience members of all ages are friends of ours on Facebook.
It's fun for me because I can update things quickly there also, or Laura frequently takes a picture of the stage when we're rehearsing or right before we're rehearsing, and you know, that kind of helps build a little bit of excitement. And in this case also, we had so many people participating in the concert because we had the symphony members themselves, and then we had the tech chorale and the master singers and these great soloists, and so there just was a lot of talking back and forth about the excitement. And then the real fun, I think, was some of the pictures that were put up, some not by us. There was one that came from, I think there was a student in the catwalk that took one of the pictures of all the people on stage, and then all the tagging that happened right away, and that was really neat. And then people talking about, you know, like one person's was tagged in the photo, and their mother said this is the best performance she's ever seen in Cookeville, and she's been going to the symphony since 1978 or whatever. Just, it's really neat to kind of see that kind of buzz, and to hear people talking about it. It was just really a lot of fun. And also, you know, people from far away who know members of the choir or the orchestra. My sister Lisa is always quick to comment on the Bryan Symphony. She lives in Salt Lake City, so she's always willing to lend her support. And then my mom goes, when my sister's at my mom's house, my mom doesn't have a computer, and so she gets on my sister's smartphone and she can look at pictures. And so it's really neat to see how that kind of works for everybody, not just for me, but the students, especially who are in the, I think a lot of the comments were from people congratulating people in the chorus, and it was just really exciting.
And also just about getting the word out about what lives here in Cookeville, and the added excitement of having the tech chorale and the master singers a part of it. How often do you get to collaborate with those entities, those groups?
We kind of have been on a schedule of every other year. We try to do something, you know, it's like working with the master singers is one of our more obvious ways of staying in touch with the grassroots, you know, performing arts network here. And so that's a great group of amateur musicians, many of whom are faithful audience members of ours anyway, some of whom then come to us from that situation actually, because that's the first time they've heard the orchestra or something, or people who are new to the community who, you know, are looking for things. I think master singers also I mean, I know a couple people who were in Master Singers this term who haven't been in it for a few years. And then, of course, they found out that they were doing Beethoven 9 with us, and they were quick to join up again, because it is really, you know, there are very few people who get to sing that piece many times in their life, and so that was a really neat cross, you know, a little hybrid going on there. They're good for us, good for them, and we try and do that every few years. So we just kind of keep in touch with it. Sometimes the chorale, when we do an opera, the tech chorale will also do a little bit of work with us, but it's an informal relationship that's really been beneficial in both ways.
And it's nice to have something like that, because I've noticed that you're doing more interactive activities at the concerts and trying to look outside the box of a way to present a concert and having different forms of art involved with it. And I find that's really cool.
Well, we just feel like we're a part of a very special community here, and we're a very old and prominent part of that community because we're 50, and so you know, we're really proud of that. But my whole goal always is to foment everybody's creative activities, students, professionals, because we're all part of a healthy arts ecosystem, and it can't be overbalanced in one way or the other. We are a very strong part of the arts community here. Like I said, a long-standing part of that, and we have a big financial impact. But it's part of this, you know, it's fun for me when we're on Facebook, when I see people from other arts organizations commenting on it or looking forward to this, and I try and go to their shows and they come to our shows, and you know, we're all fomenting something that's really integral, and it can't be just one thing. And that's the same thing. I feel that way about education. Is the same thing. You know, education is about an ecosystem. It's not just one thing. It's about the whole education system. Well, the arts community is the same way. We need to, you know, be fomenting a vibrant arts community. And I think by doing something every once in a while, by doing something just huge, you know, a big undertaking for us, both personnel and financially, like Beethoven 9 or like an opera, it has an impact. You know, the wave goes out and everybody feels a little bit more brave, and we do things. So we love to collaborate directly, but it's also this indirect way of just kind of feeding the whole system that's nice.
And speaking of education, your education concert is coming up here pretty soon. It's the day after the concert. So what do you have in store for this year? Oh,
it's one of my favorite events of the year, and it's also one of the more nerve-wracking events for us because, you know, here's the thing. Adults like to have control over things, and we basically are event planners. So we plan these, you know, huge events, and so when people buy our tickets and you know, they come in and they pay, and you know, it's a pretty staid group or whatever, and then we say, hey, let's have 800 fourth graders come to a concert. Well, that's a different kind of feeling, and it's a great energy. There's no more fun than doing that in front of these kids. They're so excited. You know, they get on the bus, they get to leave school, and they come to a place they haven't been. We're doing the two pieces we're featuring for them from the concert are, one, the Greg Danner piece, The Greatest Generation, but also a piece by a friend of mine, Jonathan Bailey Holland. It's called Motor City Dance Mix, which is this very funky piece that is basically an orchestra mixed with Motown. Jonathan's a young African-American composer that I met. He and I did a world premiere with the Dallas Symphony. And he's so great at taking various influences and putting it on orchestra and making it sound so cool. We read through a rehearsal the other day, and just the smiles that came on everybody's face in the orchestra when we started doing this. And we had a little break in rehearsal. We're like, wouldn't it be great if we had a disco ball that we could come down on? And then we started talking about, like, it could come down on the scissor lift for our Proxima projector.
Nice.
And because there's just something about this great feeling that he's created in this music. So I think the kids are going to love it. You know?
And that's two different worlds of music colliding, and that's really cool.
It's you know, but it's what's happened forever. I mean, forever, classical composers have been taking current music and infusing our genre with it. And it's the same thing we're going to talk about a little bit more after the break about Gershwin. You know, this was a new idea to bring jazz into the concert hall. And so when I was looking for another piece on this program, I remembered that I'd been wanting to do Jonathan's piece for a long time. I've known him since about 2004. And all of a sudden this opportunity came. I said, here it is. This is perfect. And it's a great way to talk about these influences. So.
And with the education show, how many years have you been doing this, and what areas are the students from?
We started in, let's see, 2004, my second year here. I think it was one of the first things I said when I came here. Is like, where's our education concert? And they said, well, we used to do one, and so I think it's been happening since 2004-05. And our goal is to present the concert to every fourth grader in the Putnam County school system. And we've achieved that. And so it's actually not a field trip, it's an actual curricular event for them, which means we pay for the buses, the concert, everything, because we don't want people having to make a choice between this and something else. It's a part of their music curriculum. We meet state standards to help the teachers with these things. And so that, like I said, is really exciting. Last year, we were able to add Warren County. So it's just really exciting to have this. Now it just seems like it's a thing we do every year. And there was a couple years, you know, and listen, it's hard to find funding for the concert. But, you know, one year when we didn't have funding, we thought, we can't let this drop now. We've spent so much time getting this to be a regular part of our season, and the school teachers and the school system expecting that. If you drop something out like this, you have to rebuild that expectation again. So it's very exciting to have it a part of our normal, you know, this is what we do.
I'm so excited to hear about the upcoming concert. We had the opportunity to talk to Greg Danner at the War Memorial on the Square. So take a look, and we'll be back with more on BSO Backstage.
Well, the inspiration came really in two parts. One was my father and his participation in the war, and the fact that he's one of the greatest generation, both my father and my mother. My dad was born in 1922. My mom was born, she wouldn't want me to say this, but she was born a couple of years before that. And also, what renewed a lot of people's interest in the greatest generation was Tom Brokaw's book of that title. In fact, Brokaw really coined that phrase, the greatest generation. And so I was fascinated with reading the book, and also, you know, had the opportunity to speak to my dad about his growing up in the Great Depression and his service in World War II. So all these things came together, and as a composer, always looking for subject matter that I think would be both interesting to me and hopefully interesting to an audience. After I read Tom Brokaw's book, I was really fascinated with that whole idea of the service that the individuals from that time had given to the country. And in fact, after Brokaw's initial book, there were several follow-up books, and one of them was titled The Greatest Generation, Letters and Remembrances. And that's what I drew the actual content of the narration from, were 4 letters that were brought to Brokaw's attention and that he published in one of the follow-up books to his original Greatest Generation. Is a letter that was written as a retrospective letter from a surgeon who served in the war, and he details how he feels growing up in that time affected him and really the future, and how that the values and just the ideas that have been a part of the Greatest Generation are still very much at the core of being an American today. We were privileged to grow up in a time when honor, truth, loyalty, duty, and patriotism were real and meant something. What made the generation great? We were simply a product of our times. Growing up in the Depression was not a great honor, but it was a classroom that taught us to be independent and innovative. We made our own toys out of orange crates and roller skates. We made our kites from newspapers, and we melted lead to pour into molds to make soldiers, cowboys, and Indians. The Depression was a leveler too. I grew up in what was considered a middle-class family. By today's standards, we would be considered poor, but nobody came around to tell us so. Everyone was in the same boat, and extended families helped each other. I wore many clothes that had belonged to one of my cousins or my big brother. Getting some bit of clothing of your own, that was new. That was a big event. All of these things stayed with us after the war was over. It changed us all. Somewhere in the deep recesses of the mind, there's a little voice that reminds us from time to time. You survived. You're alive. Don't waste your life. Do something with it.
Wow, wasn't that excerpt beautiful? What were some of your thoughts on it, Laura?
I got to be there for that taping, and Greg, I mean, the narration is just touching. It's moving. Quoting the surgeon many years later, looking back at what it was like for World War II. I got chill bumps. I mean, it's just beautiful. And one of the neat things I thought about the whole project with Greg is that the families of these veterans, he talked with, of course, many years later to get permission to use their letters as part of this narration. And he said that they're just so thrilled that people remember, that people even go back and think about World War II, because it's been 50, 60 years now, 60, almost 70 years at this point since the end of the war. So it was a long time ago.
And the greatest generation, I know that we're starting to lose some of the members of that generation, so it's really nice to make sure that we do continue remembering what they brought to our country. And also dealing with, I know every generation feels that they have gone through the hardest times ever, but there was just something really unique about the people that grew up during this World War II, the Depression, as well as, you know, with World War I. So how did the composition of Greg Danner coming in and doing this piece with the Bryan Symphony Orchestra, how did that all come about?
Well, you know, this was part of planning the 50th anniversary celebration that we've been looking back and looking forward. And I knew that we wanted to do something new, some kind of a new piece. And, you know, Greg had won an award for this piece, and it existed for band. It was commissioned and written for band. And I thought, what a great opportunity to bring this to another audience. So we commissioned Greg. I talked to him about it and commissioned him to re-orchestrate the piece, or orchestrate it. And he and I went through it this summer again. He brought the initial orchestration to me, and we went through and you know, tinkered with some things. And it was kind of nice because we were coupling this with the premiere of Greg's work on our first concert, which he wrote to celebrate the symphony's 50th anniversary. But it just seemed like an appropriate thing. And like you mentioned, we have been losing members of the greatest generation rapidly now, and this is a great opportunity to one more time thank them. And then in the narration, it's really touching how he talks about, the narration expresses that this was a generation that was hardened and tempered by hard times. And I think that's a great thing for us to relearn currently. That's the great thing about history is, well, the sad and good thing about history is that it repeats itself. And so looking back at that greatest generation, which meant so much for the world, I think that, you know, we are living in challenging times now, and I think that we're going to come out of this, and we can be inspired anyway to come out of this with another greatest generation. And who knows what that will mean, but I think that you know, this is a generation that banded together and celebrated by their actions what a great America can be. So it's really fun for us to be able to celebrate that at this time, especially looking back at our 50th anniversary year. And I'm really excited that my tech colleague, Mark Creeder, is going to be narrating the piece for us. And Mark is well known to many people here through his directing and acting in the theater, and he just is really excited, real honored to be a part of it.
And also part of this show, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. So what was going through your mind when you were putting this showcase together?
We have a lot of Gershwin fans in our audience, and I'm a Gershwin fan. But I'll tell you, the music is incredibly expensive to rent. You can't buy a copy of Rhapsody in Blue for orchestra. So it's $500 just to rent the piece, and it's only a 16-minute piece. So I don't know, somebody do the math quick. Not me. And it's a piece that's kind of been on the, you know, the blocks, and a lot of people have talked to me about it. And then finally they ganged up at me at a symphony social one time, including our former executive director, Gail Luna. And they said, well, I would help pay for the rental of that piece of music or whatever. So, and I, you know, like they had to twist my arm. It's a great piece. But it also takes a very particular kind of performer to perform a piece like this. It's not easy, and you have to have a great grasp of, one, piano technique, but also what this piece is really supposed to be like. And part of that is interesting if you go like on YouTube and you look at the performances of Rhapsody in Blue. They vary by about, it's only a 16, I think it's a 16 or 17 minute piece. You'll see performances as long as 20 minutes, you know, because people are drawing things out. The way it's performed is very different. Well, there's a pianist that we've had here once before, Michael Chertock, who is a friend of mine from about 15 or 20 years back. He's the resident pianist of the Cincinnati Symphony, but he also has performed this piece, I think something like 15 times with the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra. He knows this piece inside and out. He can do it. In fact, he's performing it the night before he comes here in Ottawa, Canada.
Wow.
So he'll be having an early morning flight to get to rehearsal with us, but he can just do it, and it's so natural and organic to hear him play the piece. So, you know, all these things kind of came together. The symphony people ganging up on me, Michael being available, my own love of Gershwin. So that's what makes it kind of come together. And again, this ended up being a, you know, I'm trying to piece together something that's uniquely maybe American on this concert, but not in a kitschy way, and not in a way that's been necessarily done before. We've done a lot of work by American composers, and you know, that's fun to do. But I wanted to piece together things that had maybe new meaning. So here we have, you know, two works that our audience has never heard: Jonathan Bailey Holland's work and Greg Danner's work, along with something that is very familiar and that they've kind of been hungry for. So they're going to come and enjoy all those things together.
And so when you're putting together program notes for the show, what's the process for that? Like, I feel like when I was checking them out, because I get to get a preview, and I just love the story flow. So what is your technique? What are some of your...
Laura's technique is to corner me in my office. She can tell you about that.
Dan and I set aside 5 weeks every summer, and we do one concert a week. I interview him. I do a lot of research to learn what kinds of questions to ask. And Dan is my teacher, essentially, in addition to being an interview subject for these sessions. I go back then and do a little bit more research, write them, and then we edit them together. Again, in a teacher sort of role, he's picking me up where I might have misunderstood something, or they're just, the storylines are so compelling because the programming is so compelling. You know, when putting Gershwin in the context of Mr. Holland and Greg Danner, it's just, that makes the storyline just fascinating. And so it's really easy to write.
I think one of the reasons the program notes are fresh is because it is a conversation. Mm-hmm. It's born of a conversation. When I first came here, I think some of the previous music directors had written their own program notes, and I immediately told our then executive director, Gail Luna, I said, I don't want the audience to have to hear me talk about the music one more time. You know, we've got a TV show, which is great. We've got a luncheon lecture, which is great. We need more people talking about this. So, and that year we had a friend of mine who writes program notes, who's a reporter. He lives in Missoula, Montana, but he's a great, he's a former music performer, and he's a reporter, and he wrote the notes for us that year. And people thought they were really fresh because, you know, he's a guy not coming to the concert, not getting my line on this, but just bringing his take on the music. So that's really refreshing. Plus, people can go to the pre-concert lecture with Kathy Godis, so they have an opportunity to hear a lot about this music. So Laura and I have a great time talking about the music, and she asked me why I put these pieces together. And it just, like I said, it's born of a conversation. And the thing is, it's because my world view is very slanted, because I went to graduate school for 10 years or whatever, you know, I mean, I'm like a music nerd. And so what I have to say without having a conversation about it, like we are able to do here or whatever, is not as interesting as it is with the conversation, because that way I'm talking about things that Laura wants to know about the pieces. And sometimes I have to say, well, here's what I really want to tell you, but it's also born of what people want to know. And that makes it interesting to me, and I think to other people.
And when you're putting together each concert, are you going with a theme? Or is that just kind of something that happens spontaneously when you think about the pieces that you want to do?
Well, I do have like a secret list of pieces that I've always wanted to do, you know, so there's my own musical training which comes into it. But also I see myself as a man of my generation. You know, I grew up, you know, played in garage bands. You know, I did whatever. I'm in many ways, I'm a typical 45-year-old American guy.
So yeah, excited to hear about the lineup for this show. How can people get tickets and hear more about what's going on with the Bryan Symphony Orchestra?
They can call us at the office at 931-525-2633, or they can look at our website at www.bryansymphony.org. I'd like to mention too, Dan had mentioned before his responsiveness to people cornering him about Rhapsody in Blue this time. Those same people are the people who are sponsoring the concert in November. We've got the Reverend Herb and Mrs. Betty Catlin are our sponsors, and I believe they're probably the first people who approached you about possibly doing some Gershwin.
And they're every year they're nice to sponsor.
Bob and Gail Luna, another set of people who sponsor concerts every year. They're co-sponsored this year, and Luna and Birdwell Investment Group. And we even have a little extra support from Robert and Mary Dale Summers. So we have a lot of people who want to see this show. We're very excited.
Well, we're excited to check out the concert for November 18th. And I'd like to thank you, Dan and Laura, for joining me here at Sweet Sally's. And we'll see you next time on BSO Backstage.